It's GameCube Index, and this week we rotate, stack, match, and react. So far, 56 games and 6 months into the GameCube's life cycle, there had really only been one puzzle game, Super Monkey Ball. And even then, that wasn't a traditional puzzle experience, so fans of the genre were hankering for some sort of game to scratch that itch. Thankfully, this small drought wouldn't last long as the folks over at Puzzle Kings were about to drop ZooCube on the unsuspecting masses. The basic premise is incredibly bizarre. Many years before, Dr. Buck Ooze performed controversial animal shaping experiments which resulted in unnatural shapes. As the species he was working on became extinct, the ZooCube was created, a machine used to reverse Ooze's work and return the animals to normal. Unfortunately, Ooze was captured after construction began and progress on the ZooCube was postponed for 13 years. The doctor has now escaped and it is up to the player to use the ZooCube to save the animals. Now, in the game, the aforementioned cube floats in midair on the middle of the screen as animal-themed shapes inch in forward towards the different sides. Players rotate the cube around to match pairs of shapes with each other to free the animals and score points. Everything starts out slow and simple and eventually becomes faster and harder to handle. Well, actually scratch that. It gets faster for sure, but it's not very hard to handle. While it may be reminiscent of classic titles like, say, Tetris, ZooCube absolutely feels like a title you would have rented but never would have purchased. It can be challenging, but it's not in a satisfying way that leaves you wanting to continue and better yourself. Instead, the low-key gameplay and even lower-grade art direction made ZooCube feel like a game that you would probably find in a doctor's office waiting room. Puzzle Kings and their development partner Coyote, they shouldn't be faulted for their game design aspirations. It was a really interesting idea in theory for a new sort of puzzle title, especially one in an isometric viewpoint, but unfortunately it was the execution that left the whole package feeling empty. Beyond the story mode, there was little to no variety in the ways that the game plays, even amongst the 11 other game modes, which made it a lot tougher to jump in and made gameplay feel extremely limited. Multiplayer, as it often does, did enhance things, turning it into a shared experience that you can mostly enjoy. But it didn't bring enough to the table to make ZooCube become a classic hit that stayed with players for ages. Instead, ZooCube was ported to the Game Boy Advance, where it didn't do very well, and it was eventually ported to the PS2, where it did about as well as it did on the GameCube. There was never a sequel, and Puzzle Kings would go on to become a developer for iPhone games. They seem to have just made a game based on Fantastic Mr. Fox, and not done much else since. ZooCube proved to be little more than a drop in the ocean for puzzle titles, but fans of the genre would get some sweet satisfaction just a few months later when Tetris Worlds made its way to the console. It's unfortunate that ZooCube ended up being as mediocre as it was, as the premise and idea were both solid, but it just goes to show that great ideas need great execution to back them up. That is it for this week's episode of GameCube Index. If you enjoy the videos every week, consider backing us on Patreon. Even $1 a month will do a lot to support the project and help improve the experience. It's entirely up to you. Either way, please continue to show your support by subscribing, sharing, following along on Twitter at GCNdex and at GCNdex.com. Thank you so much for watching. Tune in next time when we try and create a legend in Legends of Wrestling.